Bajitunda. All on day, the one that fits ya. Katikin Bajitunda. All on day, the one that fits.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Nile Book Club. It is September and it's autumn, and we are reading, this month we're reviewing At Night All Blood is Black by David Diop. And we're really excited to have a new member join us today, Patricia. And I'm not sure if I introduced myself, but my name is Katasi and my co-host, co-founder is
Kalungi Sabanda, aka Kalungi Fresh. And yes, as Katasi said, this month we read At Night All Blood is Black by David Diop in an English translation by I forgot her name, by Anna Moschovakis. And so the book At Night All Blood is Black follows Alpha, who is a Senegalese soldier who has just witnessed his more than brother, fellow Senegalese soldier, Mademba Diop, die right in front of him. And the book charts how he kind of descends to madness and so-called savagery after experiencing such a traumatic event during, I think, the Second World War. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's the Second World War. And it's, yeah, we'll go straight away. Like, we'll ask new member, Patricia, what did you think? What are your thoughts?
My first impression was that this is a very dark novel or piece of fiction. I thought it was very difficult to read at times. There was not necessarily, I think maybe not just because of how it was written, that first person narrative, it evokes a lot of emotions naturally. But I think overall it just made me feel such a deep sense of empathy for those who are living in those times and those stories also that we don't often hear of. Like, for instance, this soldier, as much as it is fiction, there were people like that. So yeah.
Yeah. Katasi, did you feel the same way? Was it a difficult read for you?
Was it a difficult read? Yeah, I think it was a difficult read. And I almost felt like quite voyeuristic in terms, like when I was reading it, like I was worried that I was enjoying it because it was so brutal and graphic. And I think Diop really took you into the trenches. But some things felt like they should be off, like out of bounds, but there was so much detail. I'm not sure I can say I enjoyed reading it because of the content, but I really liked the themes. And I think when we often think about war, it's quite Eurocentric. So it was refreshing to hear that complexity of, the colonized and their participation. And it's quite timely because it's Poppy Day soon, isn't it?
Yeah.
November 12th.
Yeah.
And also this is the second book that we've read on war, and it's never a genre I would choose. So the other book that we read was what was it?
The Shadow King.
The Shadow King by my guest day. So I think it was interesting to see what it evoked to me and comparing that.
Yeah. Well, for me, actually, I liked the length of the book, and I know when you lot say difficult read, you're not saying that it was a really kind of hard book to read. It's just that the subject matter, but I liked how kind of compact it was. It was great actually to kind of see this kind of book, this kind of subject matter written in such a compact, easy to digest, but maybe not necessarily easy to take in because of the subject matter, but easily accessible. It's like the opposite of The Shadow King, which was like a big historical fiction book, which I think can be off-putting for certain people. But I think this one is one you see, you go, oh, interesting title. Okay, doesn't go to, let me have a read of it. But then once you dive into it, you realize actually you've dived into something really interesting, which actually is probably representative of how these young African soldiers felt about going off to war. There's another book, well, it was actually a short story from Jennifer Nansubuga Makumbi, where one character wanted to, it was in Manchester happened, and one character wanted to, that I'm one of the audiobook readers of, by the way. One character wanted to go off to join the King's African Rifles, and he thought, oh, it would be a fun, interesting way to see the world. And this book is similar as well, in that Alpha and Mademba also wanted to kind of go off and see the world and leave Senegal. And it seemed really appealing, but then once they got there, they realized, oh, it's not exactly what we thought it was. Same thing with this book. You see it, you go, oh, that looks like something I can dive into. You dive into it, you're like, oh, the trenches are really cold in here. So I like the accessibility. Definitely the subject matter was so dark, and but he wrote it in such a, well, he and then translated in such a young person way of writing, a bit like Beast of No Nation, like, you know, like it's like this innocent young person, and you're there kind of going, oh man, you're skirting over these really difficult things, but it makes it even more gruesome because it's a young 18, 19-year-old experiencing this. But yeah, was there, I know the ending kind of threw me a little bit. It appeared to come out of nowhere, that kind of story at the end. What did you lot think about that? The lion and the deer and all that stuff. Patricia?
It definitely took me by surprise. I think it was when it changed from a first person narrative to a third person narrative. I instantly was asking what was going on here. But to me, it almost felt as if Alpha maybe could have been speaking from the afterlife, perhaps. I did feel that it did make it seem as if Mademba's presence hadn't actually left. And I think the constant references throughout the novel back to him, sort of that duality, that back and forth, it just made me question sort of whether everything we've read, whether that was actually, whether it was intentionally structured in that way to convey a particular, the particular significance of Mademba's, his importance in the novel as a whole. I just thought it was very interesting that Alpha kept referring to him. I mean, it's still difficult for me to sort of understand. I'm not too sure about you, Katasi, because I was juggling between endings. I wasn't too sure whether he died, you know, whether it had all been a spiritual experience. I couldn't quite conclude.
Yeah, I was also wondering what happened at the end. And when we started talking about the deer and the lion, it went over my head. And even before I ended the book, I told my partner, this might have to be one that I reread because I'm baffed. And it's not like you say, Mademba's presence was so felt throughout that it almost felt like it was haunting him, perhaps. And then I did try to start reading it again, but because it's so gruesome, I don't want to relive all the hand chopping and that detail. So I thought maybe I'll go to the sort of last 40 pages, but even then I was like, no, I'm just not gonna get it. It's okay.
Yeah, you know what, that little section, well, it's not a little section, but that section when he starts talking about the princess and the lion, I was like, what's going on here? But then there was a moment where they said that there's a hidden meaning in this story, and it's like it was something to do with what did you say, that if you're able to kind of dissect this meaning, or if you're able to see life or his own story as one that's kind of like has some sort of hidden meaning, then you understand life, or you understand the story. And it's kind of like these stories we grow up like hearing of the the lion and the hare and so on and so forth. And I know they're not talking about lions, and I know they're not talking about deers or tortoise and the hares, and there's always some sort of meaning behind these kind of nursery rhymes or stories that you hear and so on and so forth. I thought that was that. But then at the end where he talks about, with Mademba, I am him and he is me. he did say he is more than brother. So they have like this connection, like Mademba, and you know, because his family adopted him. He never had a mother. He had a father who's really old. He kind of had this connection with Mademba, um, that I think even when he's in in hospital, it felt like he was almost giving Mademba a chance to live again, to relive again, because he always coveted Alpha's body and Alpha's life and everything, and he's like, well, seeing as I'm here, maybe I can give Mademba a chance to kind of live through me. Like you said, Patricia, was it some spiritual connection? And yeah, it threw me a little bit, but I have to say I enjoyed reading it. I enjoyed the language. I enjoyed that kind of accessible way of writing, the repetition of like the names like Ibrahima, Sek, the kind of, what is it, the Guerre de Croix recipient and so on, like repeating all these names, and it's like mirroring the repetition of war and putting it in your names in your head as well, to remember these people's names. Jean Baptiste all the time, Jean Baptiste, repeating people's names. So I really, did that jar anyone? Was that something that was like, come on, man, enough of that?
It didn't necessarily annoy me, but I did find that the repetition was very indicative of his mental state. And I thought that it was actually quite powerful, how it was actually executed. Because even just, we talk of repetition, that the reference to God's truth, it was just a constant thing. Nearly every single page had those words. So for me, it made me question what he was saying as he was saying it. But I thought it was effective for that reason, because it was showing how his mental state was just descending, and he had no control, essentially.
Yeah, I didn't mind the repetition. I quite liked it, because it kind of felt like a chorus. It was quite theatrical in a way, and I think it was, there's like, this is influenced by the Wolof, right? Because we're meant to assume that we're meant to assume that Alpha is of Wolof heritage, right? So you got that storytelling and that culture in there. And I did feel I felt it was unfortunate, but I don't understand what the Deer story was about, because that was probably, again, homage to a Wolof folktale or something. But again, books of this caliber and, award-winning books, I think, are meant to be read again. So if I did read it again, I'm sure I'd get more. I'd hope I'd get that. What else was I gonna say? Yeah, and I think the names and the characters really did stand out. So like definitely Jean Baptiste. You got a really clear picture of who the key players were in the trench, and the doctor, and even, yeah. So I think often with some books I get confused that there's too many characters and I'm trying to put too much together, but I like that repetition. I thought it was really effective. And I think talking about hands, I want to talk about the hands. Is it okay if we talk about the hands?
Yeah, let's talk about them.
So I think it was interesting in the sense that there were these young soldiers were encouraged to be savage, and quite barbaric, and that was because of their African heritage, right? And all the associations that come with sorcery and it being a darker continent. And when I read another review that brought this up, that this hand chopping wasn't like an African thing, like the Belgians did this. And I remembered, reading The Ghost of King Leopold, and that was really graphic, how they used severing people's hands as a means of trading, and also punishing the Congolese people for not sort of producing enough rubber. So it was an interesting take when they rejected him, but they applauded him for being savage until it got to the blue-eyed boy, maybe, but they realized that this is too much. But I think that was a really smart way of putting in like the ethics of war and what's too much and what are the limitations or limits.
Yeah. Yeah, there has, you know what, maybe I've been exposed to too much kind of violent movies and books, but I wasn't as kind of like grossed out by like his savagery. it was kind of their response to him after it reached a certain amount that kind of made me think, why did you guys, you should really and truly, when he started doing it the first time round, that's when you lot should have gone, hey mate, that's too much. Like, it was okay. They kind of excused him because he was willing to put his life on the line, but for some reason, only when it started scaring them, when it started kind of like affecting them personally, and actually when it was attached to him being, what is it, a dem or a some sort, yeah, when they started worrying that he was being too African, or too savage, did they start kind of thinking, okay, you've lost your mind now. So their response is the thing that kind of threw me slightly. But actually, the most gruesome thing was when those soldiers decided not to fight, to come out the trench, and then they were like, "Oh, well, we're gonna turn you around and shoot you, and if if you don't get up, whatever, or if you don't do nothing, you're gonna die. If you decide not to fight, you're gonna die without any kind of like praise, posthumous praise, and your widows won't get any pension." And that was dark. Like, that was really, really, really dark. But again, at the end of the day, like, it makes me wonder why people decide to go to war in the first place, because you're effectively lining yourself up to get shot, and also you're preparing yourself to kill another human being. And why do that? Why do that? But yeah, the title itself, like, what was the kind of like the provocation around that? Like, what at night? Or what do you think David Diop was trying to say? I know it sounds really like self-explanatory, but what's the significance of the title? Do you guys think?
Maybe just before we go to the significance of the title, the point you raised about why people go to war. So even though this was set in like World War II, I think that theme around the motivations of war still stands today, because, bringing it closer to home, I know a number of Ugandans that went to Iraq as security guards, for example, to protect the American soldiers. Or, you hear about receiving citizenship based on how long you spend in the army. It's an entry point into the West. And this was, again, their promise, wasn't it? That they would come out and have access to more, trying to better their lives. So that's really quite unethical, but you had to kill life in order to receive a better life as you're living. So I thought that was quite interesting in terms of how that's still a thing now. And I think, to answer your question around At Night All Blood is Black, I think for me, it was just that life is life, and it's that universe that you don't see color when people are dead. Everyone is just dead, essentially. That's not very articulate, but do you know what I mean? Like, when people in war, like, a life is a life. Like, everyone's equal, and everyone will die the same way. I think that's what it meant for me.
What did it mean for you, Patricia?
I thought my connotations were slightly different. I was just thinking more about the idea of blackness and darkness. And for me, that it just evokes very negative energy and negative imagery as well. So for me, it's just that when it's dark or when it's night, things end, or bad things can happen. But I associate the night with just darkness and evil. So yeah.
Yeah, At Night All Blood is Black. Like, he does kind of take advantage of the nighttime to do his killing and his savagery. And he took advantage of the fact that he could blend into the mud and go. But also as well, maybe he's saying that similar thing that you said, Katasi, which is like, once your blood is shed, it doesn't matter what skin color the blood is coming from. Like, what's inside of you, effectively, we're all the same, is effectively saying, when you fade to black, the curtains come down on your life. At the end of the day, we are all the same, and we're fighting as if we're different. So like the French were fighting here, the Germans, whatever, but when they all bled the same color. And they were, the Germans might have thought they were more superior because they had the blue eyes and blonde hair. But then when they killed the blue-eyed guy, he had the same blood as Mademba. In the nighttime, the blood would be the same. Anyone who goes around surveying the kind of the spoils of war in the trenches, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference with, oh, this is the African blood, this is the European blood. It's all the same. So therefore, this fighting and spilling of blood is pointless, especially when it's based off of so-called supremacy or superiority of different kind of countries and races and so on and so forth. But yeah, it's interesting. I do find it interesting that he got like this lady to translate it. I don't know if that changes what we get from it, like from French, which is a European language, but into English, another European language. But because he was talking about Africa, like the characters, in Africa, and I just wonder if any of the stuff, is anyone familiar with the French version? Was there kind of loss of translation in some of the things? Were there some things we missed, especially in regards to the kind of the African moments? Do you think there could have been especially when it comes to translations like this?
I think so. I mean, I studied history at undergrad, and I remember when I look at primary source documents and just compare them with actual, textbooks written by historians. And I think it's a massive issue. We will never truly get the exact meanings. And I think some of that is particularly lost with the imagery and the tales and some of the stories. I mean, the references to lion. And I think some of the Senegalese history, the way it's intertwined and adapted, I don't think we could ever get the purity of that. Just because a translation will always dilute it, because it's, in essence, the whole point of it is to make it palatable to us as readers globally.
Yeah, I hear that. And like the way that Alpha speaks is quite simplistic, as you pointed out earlier, Kalungi, right? And he's meant to be thinking in Wolof. So it's quite complex, and that's why he's thinking in Wolof but speaking in French. So it's quite layered. And when I heard that, and I saw that he'd chosen Anna, who I'm sure did a fantastic job, I did wonder why he couldn't get someone that was Senegalese and Wolof speaking, because I think it might have been a richer translation potentially, but we'll never know.
Yeah, because I see interviews about translators and the authors, the relationship they have with that, and how the translator author relationship is so important. Like it's like they have to be so linked. Like there's some authors who get their wives or their husbands or their partners to translate their work for them, or if you're like Ngugi wa Thiong'o, you translate it yourself. And he was on this list of international Booker Prize nominees that David Diop won, and also Anna, the translator, won, Anna Moschovakis. But yeah, like there is a little bit of, I did feel like there was probably a little bit of dilution of maybe some of the stuff that maybe David Diop would have written initially, and also maybe how Alpha would have responded, and maybe that's why that little story at the end, the Lion and the Princess, or the Lion and the Deer, I don't know who's the core star of that story, but like maybe that's why there was a little bit of confusion, because it seemed to have appeared from nowhere, and it just kind of threw me a bit. But what did you lot think about the reason for, is it Barry Tiam, for her to kind of let Alpha in? Why did she let him in, and why did she have sex with him effectively? Like, was it for the reason that he said, was like to try and, I think he gave the reason of something like she went against the family tradition and so on and so forth, like to try and give him an experience before war. But I have my reason. What's your reason? What do you think Fari did that for real, for real?
Oh, Patricia, you can go first.
I actually don't have an answer just yet, but I didn't believe that his interpretation was correct, and I thought that there was an issue there for them, I think, in terms of sort of how he sees the world and compared with her at that point, particularly also as a male figure, him assuming that she was sexually intimate because she was aware that he wouldn't return as he pursued greater pastures. I didn't quite believe that, but I think it's open to you guys too.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer for you, Patricia. But when you say that, his whole perception of like his engagements of women, apart from say his mother, were quite complex, you know. I'm not sure. Again, this is why I need to read it again. I'm not entirely sure. I believe anything of his perceptions or his interactions with women, including the nurse. Like, she was really into him, but like his viewpoint was obviously affected by his deteriorating mental health. That it's hard to understand or establish what was true and what was just fantasy.
And can I just add that I also felt that his relationship with women, it was, I know it sounds like a cliche, but it was inherently dictated by the initial relationship he had with his mother. And at times the way the text was written, it was almost as if he perceived everything very simply, like there was very little complexity to it, which for me, it just had me asking a number of questions, because it did feel like he didn't quite he did not necessarily have the maturity, but he lacked a certain understanding of that relationship with the opposite sex. And I'm not too sure if that, that gap in sort of the maternal relationship had an impact on that. But I think there was a possibility, just because it was just too simplistic. It was almost as A equals C. So yeah.
I agree with that, Patricia. Like, I think they skirted over that a bit. I think like he could have dug deeper into how the fact that his mother pretty much abandoned him affected his relationship with himself as well, like how he viewed himself. He thought he was the dog's bollocks. His perception of self and also perception of relationship with women. But I feel like he did misinterpret why Fari kind of had sex with him, because I maybe I'm misinterpreting this as well, but I think she realized, not because he's never coming back. I kind of feel like she realized, you're gonna die, mate. Like, you're actually gonna die. And she probably was thinking, let me at least kind of, if you do die, let me at least continue your lineage somehow. I don't know, or contribute to your name and our kind of like, let me help you have something to get from this war, because you will die when you go off. But at least maybe if she falls pregnant, and again, I could be misinterpreted as well, but like there could be a child, and if he doesn't come back, then that that child, well, I've got you both looking going, where was that written? But yeah. But I just felt like that, especially based off of the Tiams and the Ndiayas, they're kind of like the family history that they had, where they weren't meant to be friends, and there were like this animosity between them. For Fari to go against that and say she's gonna sleep with this guy who the family detest, dude who's going off to war, it just feels like, and especially as well in history as well, a lot of times that was the case, where you're a historian, you can tell me if I'm wrong here, where some people decided to sleep together before war to say, let's have a kid at the end of this, so that you can continue, because you realize the immortality of your existence. And I think he was so immature that he didn't even realize that. And she kind of went, yeah, mate, let's try help you here somehow. Or have I misread that completely?
No, I believe there was naivety on his part, and you get that sense. It's throughout. There's that mental, not mental deterioration, but we see his issues with his mental health throughout, but there's also those instances where he's just very naive. It's almost as if he doesn't question certain situations just because it could be because of his hopes for the future. It could be because he needs to sort of live in the present moment. It's very unclear. And I can imagine being on the battlefield or having to go to the battlefield. A lot of men and women had to sort of change their perspective. I mean, you can't be that forward-looking and forward-thinking, but I definitely believe that he was naive, like you said, Kalungi.
Yeah, Katasi, has that changed your kind of your view on what Ferry's intentions are, and also Alpha's kind of interpretations of her intention?
No, I mean, I think that's quite fair. Like, it's kind of like, even when you're not, or when you go on a holiday and people holiday romances,
Yeah.
never gonna see you again.
Yeah.
Probably before social media. Yeah, I think that's your take is quite plausible. But sometimes this book took me, like, I felt like I was wrestling with it at times, like, and there's another section where he refers to Fairy then sleeping with Mademba. Am I making that up?
No.
Oh, yeah.
He makes the reference.
Yeah, towards the end, right?
Yeah, and then I was like, hang on, what's going on here? So was Fairy pretending?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No, I think there was the moment where it goes in, that's when their kind of minds start morphing, or their spirits start morphing. So we see the POV of Mademba saying, I noticed them heading off. Like, is that the one you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, that's it. But and that Fairy had taken him for herself. I understood when Fairy Tim took her leave of us. I understood that Fairy was daring anyone to think. Yeah, there's when Alpha Ndiaye, my northern brother, the man with the lion as a totem, that little section towards. Yeah, I think we were now seeing Mademba's view and POV of that day, that moment. And I think that's a point in kind of David Diop trying to say that their psyche is somehow morphed. I liked that strangeness, that weirdness, and maybe it does mirror the kind of mental deterioration that young Alpha is going through, but it did kind of make me go, what have I been reading all this time? Like, but no, I guess I'm an easy man to please in regards to these books nowadays. I think it's
but I'm glad we spoke about the life, the life before the war. I feel that I enjoyed both sections, and understanding his father's relationship with the village and the mum leaving on the boat. I really enjoyed those bits. It was quite, it enriched the story, and it sort of it was a nice pause between all that gruesome stuff.
I agree. I like that it just normalized the life of ordinary soldiers, ordinary people. It wasn't just that sort of top bottom approach of, this is what they do on the battlefield, but this is where they came from. And I do think that David Diop did do that intentionally, to almost balance what the imagery, the gruesome imagery we were seeing. I think we needed that to be able to almost empathize at times with Alpha.
Yeah, and for a really kind of like brief, it's not really brief, but like for a brief book, it had a lot of scope and scale, like especially when they went to Senegal. I thought the kind of descriptions of Senegal were really, really beautiful, and the everyday life that you two talked about, like being normalized, was great. I just loved kind of like seeing the different Senegalese names, and when he was listing them, and the kind of the rivalries between some of the, I guess, clans, and it reminded me of some of the Buganda kind of emphasis on totems and clans and so on and so forth. And I think it's a great book, really, really good. good book. I think if they make it into a movie, I kept thinking maybe it's the only Senegalese person I know, but I kept thinking Omar Sy, like a young Omar Sy from Lupin on Netflix. I don't know if you guys have seen that. I kept you don't know Lupin from Netflix? You haven't seen that? You must be the only two people that haven't seen that in the world. Wow. Just Google it very quickly when you get a chance. But I kept seeing him like a younger version of him. So, but that's because it's probably the biggest Senegalese actor in the world right now that I was just thinking about. But yeah, great, really, really, really good book. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Issa Rae is
Oh yeah, yeah, but
Rae.
like she is. But come on, is anyone? Okay, you guys don't know Omar Sy, but you know Issa Rae. That's true. That's true. But yes, I should shut up. But she don't speak French though, at least as far as I know.
We'll wait for the English translation. But, what else was I going to say? Yeah, I think the length was good. If it was any more intense, I don't think I would have finished it. If it was any longer. But yeah, I'm glad that we went to Senegal with this one, because with the Nile Book Club, Patricia, we like to go to different parts.
I like that. Yeah, that's good.
I only have.
Oh, go on. Go on. You only have,
one question.
Yeah.
And I didn't quite understand. Again, this is maybe connected to his relationship with his mother. These like sexual references to the trenches. It was like the opening of a woman's legs, like the trenches. Like there were some really absurd comparisons, but I didn't quite understand. And I wondered if anybody had seen that too. No? Okay.
No, I don't even remember that.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, I definitely saw that, Katasi. I wasn't sure. I think there were moments when I thought that it might be a reference to the concept of sort of death and rebirth and things like that. If you're entering the trenches, you're going in, you may not come out, you may come back, like little things like that. But I wasn't 100% sure because I don't think the imagery was always clear. It just was almost just sort of thrown. I think it was rushed. I think he could have sort of fleshed that out a little bit. But I did think it could be related to that concept of death and immortality, and yeah.
And rebirth, that makes sense.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, I think that's a really good point to end it on. Unless you lot have any other questions or points that you wanted to kind of discuss. I think, yeah, that's it really. I think it's overall, I thought it was a great book. I definitely recommend people to read it, and I'm glad I read it as well. And I will be revisiting it as well, because I want to kind of like dive deep into some of these things that I missed and really understand that story, the Lion and the Princess. Like I really need to understand that.
I would like to understand it too, because I want to. It's almost like that he was saying, if you don't get this, then you're not woke enough, kind of thing. So I want to be woke.
Yeah.
I felt exactly the same.
Where is it? I want to get it. Anyway.
But a part of me also thinks that maybe we're not supposed to on the first read, because those cultural connotations, we won't always get it. So this is not related to sort of this book, but when I was doing my master's, I did African studies, and I would read all these different texts, and obviously I'm Ugandan, I'm Luo, I'm not going to understand every single tribe, but you had to do your research to sort of understand, what those proverbs meant and how that was, if, for instance, when we were looking at the Mau Mau, sort of the women who were uprising during that period, we had to sort of delve in to understand sort of the meanings of what they were saying. And I think we're not supposed to, and that immediately. And I think that could be okay as well.
That is, that's really helpful. Thank you, Patricia. We don't have to get it.
Yeah. Well,
do we do any plugs this time?
Yeah, like we keep the tradition. So Patricia, we at the end we do some little plugs. Like I know you're not on the socials, but if there's anything, a paper that maybe you've written that we can read, anything out there that you've got working on that we can like engage with, let us know.
At the moment, not much, but yes, I will let you guys know of anything.
Okay. Okay. And Katasi?
Okay, thank you. I want to plug this.
Oh, yes.
This is something I was working on. Hey, Kalungi got one too. It's basically an edition of a magazine called Fair. And this was the first African city that they covered. So it's a travel and food focused independent, I would call it journal because it's so thick. It's like a coffee book table. And this one's about Kampala. So it's out now, and I kept on talking about it in previous book clubs. So it's out now. You can get it online at fairmag.com. And there's loads of contributions from different Ugandans. And I think it's a really great showcase of our capital city. So I basically guest curated this. That's my role, and that's why I'm talking about it. And I'm going to pause in case you want to say something, Kalungi. I've got something else to plug.
oh, you got, no, plug away.
Oh, okay. And then this was gifted to us. It's called Grown, and it's a celebration of Black British girlhood that will empower a generation by Melissa Cummings Corey and Natalie A. Carter. So basically, it's like the book that you wish you had when you when you were in your teens. So I'm whizzing through it quite quickly before I gift it to one of my little cousins. And that's been quite difficult because I don't think young people read that much anymore outside of academia or school. But my only qualm at the moment is, whilst I think it's a really fantastic idea, the contributors list, which is probably about 20 odd women, is very West African. And I mean, I'm probably quite Caribbean. And I just think if we're thinking about developing young Black women, I think it's important to have representation from different parts of the continent and the diaspora. That's all I want to say about this for now, but I think I might do, I'm not sure what I'll do with it, Kalungi, in terms of a review, but that's just my first observation.
Yeah. Okay, good. I recently did a recording of an audiobook. So it's a short story collection called Manchester Happened by Jennifer Nansubuga Makumbi, who wrote Chintu and The First Woman. And I was asked to go back to record 2 chapters, so the prologue and the first chapter. And I'm the only dude on the audiobook. The other readers are Anna Marie Nabidie, who is the audiobook reader for Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. You got Pepta Lunkuse and Sheila Atim, who's in The Underground on Amazon Prime. So you got some really, really good readers. So I was lucky enough to be asked to be a reader on that. It's available on Audible. People want to check that out, along with Chintu as well. That is 14 hours of just beautiful reading, because I'm the reader on that as well. So that's my plugin, and I'm still hustling, still working on creating stories, especially from a Ugandan point of view, because I think there is a dearth of those kind of stories, and we don't really get to see them as much. And I know everybody from their own kind of individual parts of the world always says that, but I do think we need, definitely more. There's a lot of Ugandan actors out there. I've mentioned a few, but I think we need now Ugandan stories to be on the big platform in the same way that other African stories are on big platforms. So that's what I'm working on, trying to create and address. Yeah, great. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Remember to comment, like, and subscribe, and follow the Nile Book Club socials on Twitter and Instagram. We're getting a lot of love from authors, from Nadifa Muhammad, following us and engaging with us. To obviously we're reaching out and catching the attention of new readers and new members like Patricia Okello here, and last week we had Chipo Correa. So we're getting more and more people, and it's great actually when it's just you pop in, you pop out. If you're able to make next month, yes, you can. If you're not, it's also fine as well. So thank you so much. We appreciate you being here, Patricia. Thank you,
Patricia.
Thank you guys as well, because you guys yeah, what you're doing is amazing. And I've seen bits and bobs, but I love the work you guys are doing. So I'm not on the socials, but keep me updated. Feel free to send me emails of the things that you're doing, because yeah, it looks great.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. Okay, Katasi, do you want to debrief very briefly?
Yeah,
Very briefly. And thank you, Patricia. Thank you.
Thanks, Patricia. Have a great week.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye.
Katasi and Kalungi, the one that fits ya.